Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Dropping Bars. Today, my guest come highly recommended. So I am very excited to have this conversation with Mr. Ray Williams. Now, Mr. Ray Williams is one of the highest ranking black banking executives in Canada. And guess what? He's a Grenadian countryman just like me. Mr. Williams, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Kimron, and appreciate being invited to speak with you.
Absolutely. Now, let's just jump right in. And Mr. Williams, can you tell us, who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So Ray Williams, interestingly enough, growing up in Grenada, in Tivoli, most people know me as Chinaman Bola.
Okay.
That's how I was known. And seriously, in fact, it wasn't until I think I was on my way to meet my parents for the first time in the UK and sitting in Barbados, going through my BOAC bag that I pulled out my passport and it said Raymond Martin Williams. And I looked at the person, I'm like, whoa, that's me. So things that you learn. But so Ray Williams, I am a husband, I am a father, mentor, collaborator. I'm also a cook. I tell people that because that's an important thing for me. But yes, I work in the banking services and financial services area. I have done so now for close to 40 years. I'm close to retirement. But the bottom line is that my job has allowed me to, along the way, get involved with a variety of asset classes. I worked in the city of London initially, in a square mile. I've reported into New York, and I've been here in Canada for 32 years. And so my entire career has been in financial services. What I do today as a vice chair and managing director at National Bank, which is one of the 6 big banks here in Canada, is that I undertake what might be deemed senior relationship management. And what does that mean? It means that I have a very long history in terms of being involved with different clients, whether in the government space, whether in the pension fund space, asset management space, corporate space, mortgage space, you name it. I've actually engaged and worked in all of those areas during my career. And so I've acquired quite a Rolodex in terms of engagement with folks at a senior level in our counterpart organizations. So it is not unusual for me to have conversations with the CIOs of some of the biggest pension funds here in Canada based on, again, the relationship I've built with them. Likewise with the provincial governments across the country, likewise with the Bank of Canada, likewise with CMHC, which is our housing, the major housing organization here in Canada from a government standpoint. And so the opportunity to engage with senior folks within those organizations actually allows me to take away valuable information about where they're heading, what they're doing, and how I can actually bring alignment with some of the services that we have internally to those very organizations. So, I'm like I said, I'm a relationship manager at this point in time. I don't execute any trades. Once upon a time, I was fairly active in that, but for the last 4 or 5 years, that has not been my role. My role has been, like I said, create engagement, bring synergy to the situation internally and put it out there externally and help my organization increase its share of wallet with our counterparts.
Oh, I am very impressed with you, Mr. Williams. And like I said before, if I can accomplish a percentage of what you have, I'll be very happy. Now, something you mentioned, while you were waiting at the airport, you realize, when you looked at your name, I have a similar experience in that when I was in Form 5, ready to do CXC, I realized it was the first time in my life I realized that my first name is not Kimron. See, all right. I realized that my first name is actually Nelson. Oh. I had no idea. For the first 16 years of my life, I thought my name was Kimron Corion.
Oh, Lord.
It's actually Nelson Corion, which is weird. so I understand what you're saying, but you just gave us some insight into who you are, and
Yes.
right. So as vice chairman and managing director of National Bank, I also know that, and let me read it out here real quick. You are a board member on various organizations, guest lecturer, co-founder of the Black Opportunities Fund, and I think you also I saw somewhere that you received an award from, I think was the BBPA. So tell me, how does someone and I really want to sort of for the young person, back in the Caribbean, Grenada, or any other country, looking on, a young boy from Tivoli in St. Andrew, moved from Tivoli in St. Andrew and go on to accomplish, all these accolades and like what is the journey like? What was that journey like? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so it's always interesting, I had a friend who passed away last year, and a couple of years ago we did this thing where we got together, and it's now that's a moniker that I stick with, which was we talked about giving back to community and where we came from and where we are, and he referenced it as the thing that we did. He called it from barefoot to the boardroom, and it was really so very appropriate because, like you, we're both country boys, right? I grew up with a cutlass in my hand. Running barefoot, you only put on a shoe on a Sunday when you went to church, when I went to Tivoli RC, right? Roman Catholic Church. And lo and behold, you kind of look at where you've come from. But I've always thought about it as I'm a curious person, first of all, right? I'm interested in things around me. I'm interested in people around me. I love to learn and acquire knowledge and know about things. Sounds simple enough. I will say also like talking to people and hearing about their backgrounds and their experiences. I think you learn so much vicariously from people. I also believe that my upbringing had a lot to do with the choices and directions I've essentially chosen. I often describe myself to people as a social justice warrior and quiet activist. And okay. I think we all see inequity around us, right? We see things we don't like. And I've always chosen to see how I can change some of that. Sometimes it's the small things that you do, but then there are other times when, as you learn more, you have the opportunity to do more. So that sort of helped develop my interest, I would say, in charities that deliver and support change, leading to sort of in more recent years, me increasingly being directly involved in helping build organizations that can have direct impact on our communities in terms of how we lift our communities. So, I came to Canada in 1990. That's 32 years ago. When I arrived in Bay Street, I looked around. I couldn't see the people that looked like me. There were few and far between. I've worked in trading rooms my entire life. There were probably 5 of us max in a trading room that had 300 people. Where I found Black people essentially were in the back offices, in the middle offices, but not front line in the same way. And so initially I started looking around to see how I can bring people together. Well, I found a guy called Patrick Warner in 1994, 95, and he was doing the same thing, but he'd been one of the first Black portfolio managers in Canada. Mm-hmm. And so Patrick gathered a bunch of us together, and we set up something called the National Association of Urban Bankers. Today, here in Canada, it's known as the Canadian Association of Financial Professionals. 3 weeks ago, we celebrated 25 years of that organization. Wow. To me, that makes a difference because what it has done, it's created a whole pipeline of young people who have talent, who have capability, given them an opportunity to engage with each other, build their networks, support each other, and here we are today. So now within Bay Street, you're seeing a lot more people that look like me, look like you, that are in positions that are more significant, that are in positions of power. And I think it's things like that that will lead to situations, that creates the opportunities for our community and sort of just really make it clear to the wider population that not only do we have our brilliance, but our brilliance can show up in the right places.
And I imagine that along the way that you would have faced some obstacles to accomplish, right? What you did. So, I mean, what are some of the obstacles or a major obstacle that you faced, and how did you overcome that?
Well, so two things. Let me start by saying that I don't think I'm so different in terms of me as a black man in my black skin with my black thoughts, working in a majority society that is not black.
Right.
I think all of us face challenges from that perspective, right? But I think also I was very, very lucky. I started my career in the financial services area in the square mile in the city of London in the 80s. There weren't too many of us around. And so that in itself was difficult and challenging. And the racism was just, rampant and evident in so many ways. So, I think my luck dates back to an early age. When I went to secondary school in Clapham, I met up with two other young men who became my steadfast friends. And those two young men were very similar to me. We had identical backgrounds. All three of us came from Caribbean islands. Me, Grenada, my good friend Devin Carney, Jamaica, my good friend Keith Thompson, Trinidad. And all of us had suffered what I would say or identical situations in terms of, families that broke up, mom and dad splitting. So suffering certain types of family trauma. The three of us became steadfast friends very early. And so I would say, here are two other people. We're all born in October of 1958. We had very similar sort of approaches, and we dreamt big. We like from 11, we were talking about what kind of big job and, etc. In many instances, we didn't go quite the way that we wanted, but we still ended up doing stuff. And I think that was really a substantial change and difference. When you have people around you who are like your personal board of directors who, align with you around what you want to achieve, it goes an awfully long way, excuse me, to creating that support group. And so, I would say to those who are struggling, find the people within your group that can provide you with honest feedback. Find people around you who are like you in terms of what it is that they're trying to achieve in their lives. Super important stuff, because it really just helps reinforce many of the things, many of the thoughts that you have about where you can go and the things that you can do. And I think that's really super important. So that personal support group is something that I would say would help take you an awfully long way with dealing with some of the challenges we face within society, because it's evident that we still have an awfully long way to go to get a more equitable society, notwithstanding the fact that you can come in with lots of skills. The very color of your skin gets in the way for people who do not have either the compassion or the ability to simply understand that you're not different from them, right? You're not different from them in terms of the ambition that you have, the things that you want to do, the things that you want to achieve, the family values you hold, and so on and so forth.
Okay, and something that you mentioned, that I really love the concept of having like your personal board of advisors, and the reason why I love this concept so much is because, I mean, based on my experience, in Grenada, while I was working in Grenada, I experienced like depending on the circle that I would have been interacting in, based on the discussion that's happening, and so my thought processes, and so it just shifted, and I kind of became like one with the groups, and that's when I realized that, hey, if I really want to grow and develop as an individual, I need to stay away from certain circles and certain discussions that are happening, and kind of move into a different circle. So I really like that concept of having that, because that group could really elevate you to really accomplishing what you want to accomplish. So I really love the fact that you mentioned that. Yeah. I want to touch on something, and it's one of my previous guests, your very good friend, Mr. Perry Douglas, we spoke about wealth creation in the Caribbean, and I would love to get your thoughts on that. What do you think are what should be the main drivers, I would say, of growth and wealth creation in the Caribbean? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really tough one to unpack, Kimron. So here's what I think. I mean, I'm horrified at the lack of thoughtfulness in large part of Caribbean islands in terms of how it speaks to whatever natural resources we have to drive productivity locally. I think about the big spends that people have, which is invariably energy and food, right? Mm-hmm. When I go home and I end up in Tivoli and I'm driving up to River Salio, I'm driving up to wherever. If it's mango season, you see mango just falling on the road, man. You're driving over mangoes like nobody's business. You go in the land and you see oranges. My mother has a couple of gosper trees in the back there. It's some of the most beautiful oranges you can come across. You got plums. You got a whole bunch of stuff. And so at that simple level around, if you look at the world around us, everyone's looking for, let's go to the sort of, naturally grown stuff. And then in Grenada, you can dig yam, pick banana. It's like the majority of it is sort of very natural. And yet, I go to a supermarket in Grenville or in St. George's in particular, and people are just buying all this foreign food. And I'm thinking, what is going on? What am I missing? And I do understand that people try to emulate, Western society from the perspective of look at what's on TV, look at, what people are wearing, look at what people are eating. Yet within the islands, from a resource standpoint, we have so much I think we could actually package a lot better and actually export. Then from the energy standpoint, I'm thinking, we've got a lot of sunshine. We've got wind too, right, especially in Grenada. There are any number of different ways we can actually harbor that energy and put it into the grid rather than being reliant on either oil that gets stupidly expensive sometimes, most of the time, that we're using. I think there's an opportunity to leapfrog and get to a place. But let's speak about one of the areas where Grenada is concerned, and many of the other Caribbean islands, where there's a huge reliance on tourism. And I find it quite shocking and very disappointing that, when I look at who builds what in Grenada, and I don't really understand all of the sort of like subsidies or discounts that are being provided to these foreigners and how Grenadian money quite often goes into supporting those industries. And I understand why, because it's like, tourists coming in, they'll buy this, they'll buy that. But I also know a lot of tourists who visit the Caribbean and other places. They'll just stay literally, on that beach for the week or 2 weeks that they're there, right? So all I'm simply saying here is, look, we need to have more extractive use from the input that we're providing to the people who are building these resorts in the Caribbean and in Grenada. Like, it's great that some people are getting jobs. Yeah, okay, so you're cleaning out a bedroom. Nothing wrong with that. But, my thought is, like, further up the food chain, if you're talking about wealth creation, let's have it be that more Grenadians have equity or have the opportunity to build their own and generate their own, right? If you're talking about wealth creation, let's look at, I remember as a child going up to Mount St. Catherine most Fridays to pick nutmeg with my great-grandmother, and Saturday mornings selling those nutmegs in the co-op in Grenville. Well, the reality is there should be an opportunity for all that fruit that I mentioned to you that's rotting to be gathered up, sold into co-ops, create juices, create preserves, whatever it might be, breadfruit chips, plantain chips, whatever, right? And all of those things, I think, has the opportunity, maybe not to create wealth in the same way that, represents large, but if you have something that represents even subsistence from that perspective where people are able to save, I think it goes a long way to sort of uplifting the economy, uplifting the community, and creating wealth for the community. Look, I'm not that smart in that space. I have sort of, very clear ideas of, what I believe, is helpful. I mean, Black Opportunity Fund is something we created here in Canada 2 years ago with the desire to engage in creating intergenerational wealth. And the whole point and the whole desire and the whole execution is, how can we provide funding to the people who come up with good ideas, that have a business plan, where we can support them, right? And we want to see more of that in terms of inventiveness and in terms of entrepreneurs in Grenada. And it doesn't have to be anything but, hey, from the perspective of how can I help, or how can I fund buying either land or whatever business it might be that you want to build, that gives you that opportunity to, create a company, create entrepreneurship along the way. So I think that's got to be part of it. Okay.
And you mentioned the Black Opportunities Fund.
Yeah.
And, funding, like I get in this case, Black entrepreneurs in Canada. And would you say that something like that is needed or required in the Caribbean? Because I think one of the things that we can agree on is that things like jobs and so are really created through entrepreneurship.
Correct.
So would you then say that we need maybe something like that in the Caribbean to invest in entrepreneurial activities? Should it be private sector driven or maybe government driven? What are your thoughts on that?
So from where I sit, reasonably speaking, some of the islands are too small to say that we're just going to drive that by ourselves. That's why you got CARICOM. That's why you have a number of what they call SSAs, sort of agencies like the IBRD, EBRD, you name it, right? World Bank, etc. There are some of them that are focused on the Caribbean. Admittedly, it strikes me that there's probably more focus on South Americas because they normally sort of like combine them together. But you need some of those organizations actually looking at how can we fund consistently projects throughout the Caribbean that would actually help and allow them to create self-sustaining outcomes for themselves. And I'm not really seeing that. So, to your question, should it be just private or should it? This actually needs to be a mix of both, in my estimation. Okay. I think you need that big mix of both because you've seen situations where when it's much larger projects, triple P, private-public partnerships end up working quite well. But you need a leg up. I mean, even Black Opportunity Fund, what we have established is something that we're driving ourselves, but we need government in there. We need large corporates in there, and we need charities in there as well, because we're trying to deliver at a wider scale to Black communities across Canada. So it's not, I don't think there is any singular sort of, body that has complete responsibility. I think it's a sort of like a whole of community approach that's required to support the outcomes that you're looking to achieve.
Okay, and you had a long and successful career. So I imagine there are many lessons that you learned along the way that you applied to your life and your journey that led you to the level of success that you've enjoyed. What would you say are like 3 lessons that you learned along the way that you can share with us?
Gosh, boy, there's been a lot of lessons along the way. I would say that as a young man, I was quite impulsive. And one of the things that I've learned along the way is that you probably need to listen more and speak less in terms of your takeaways. So that for me, and I'm stating that one, very much for myself. They say that the essence of good communication is the ability to listen. And more can be learnt from silence, i.e. you're not speaking, and giving the floor to someone else in terms of your takeaway. So that's one component. A super power that is available to everyone that not as many people from our community use, I have observed, is the nature of networking and building your networks. I would say to people that build your networks, build them away. You can build them into the areas that you are operating in professionally and socially, but don't restrict yourself to, banking. Go out to other organizations, go out to other areas and extend yourself, because not only will you learn a whole bunch, but the access that you give yourself will be amazing. All right. And that's really, really important. Then the other thing is, don't just try and go out there and undertake it from the perspective, oh, I'm going to leverage someone. You have to show some degree of integrity around what you're doing. And so understand, as you're building relationships, you need to manage them. You need to nurture them. And that simply means that as you're building a relationship with someone, check in every once in a while. That's the nurturing that's required. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But if you go in with an intent that's clear and honest, I will tell you what you will get back can be quite astonishing. But you need to build out those networks. So that's sort of like, two aspects. The other aspect is to stay curious. Stay curious. I'm a lifelong learner. I state that because I'm a curious person. I love to read. I'm a voracious reader. I read topics that has nothing to do with, the work that I undertake. But because I've basically stated I'm a lifelong learner, I need to consistently be learning new things and keeping myself up to speed. So I think sometimes the younger people within the trading room are surprised that I know as much about some of the tech stuff, because I love reading about tech. I'm not in the tech space, but that's neither here or there, right? So those are sort of two or three sort of perspectives I can share, at least from my experience.
I love that you mentioned that you're a lifelong learner, because I feel like sometimes when people, whether they've accomplished, let's say a degree or some kind of education, all of us, it's like their learning stops, and then you're speaking to them and you're realizing that, okay, what you're saying, that has been outdated since like 5 years ago. I did a master's degree in digital media. Mm-hmm. And I make this joke where I tell my friends, the things that I learned, by the time I graduated, they were outdated. because digital, it moves so fast. The digital space is moving so fast, right? So I always have to stay on top of everything. So I'm really glad you mentioned that, being a lifelong learner. That's so important. So there is there is one thing that you mentioned, and that is you're a cook. You're a chef.
Listen. I would say I'm a decent home cook, and I've had the pleasure of my mother telling me I have sweet hands. So So do you like? So do you just do it like in a private capacity with friends and so, or do you like do it commercially? No, nothing commercial. I mean, basically,
okay.
I love to cook, so I cook every single. I grew up, and Sunday meal was a big thing, as you know, in the Caribbean. So that continues to be a big thing in my life. That's how my kids grew up. They're both young adults out of the house for quite some time, but I still cook every Sunday. I love to cook for friends and family. I do an annual barbecue with a restaurant downtown in Liberty Village here in Toronto, where I basically I'm cooking up ribs of all sorts, beef ribs, chicken, nice. A whole bunch of stuff all day long, which is a tiring day. I don't know how restaurateurs do it, but boy, it ends up being a tiring, but a fun day to be out there with chefs, etc. And I also one of the boards I sit on is the George Brown College Foundation, and actually we just raised a bunch of money for what we call our food court social back in October, and I used my own recipe for pepper sauce, and myself and the students made 550 bottles that we gave away, one in the bag to each guest that attended the food court social. We raised quite a bit of money for that, where we take the opportunity to provide full scholarship for young people who are struggling with addiction issues, whether it be drugs, alcohol, whatever. And really what it does for them is give them a chance to become skilled tradespeople. I mean, you know, if you're an electrician or a plumber, let me tell you, you can make a really good living. I know this because every time one comes in this house, I feel as though, like, you know, my wallet just empties real quick.
Yeah. No, it's always great when people can combine, whether commercially or not, different skill sets. So like you're professionally you're in the financial services industry, but you have this skill whereby you a cook, you can cook, and you can, like, you go to the restaurant for a day, like you said, cook up a storm, all the ribs. I'm always impressed. As a matter of fact, I learned to cook by force because I did my undergraduate degree in Mexico. So I was over in Mexico by myself. I did my undergraduate degree in economics. I am there by myself. So there is no mommy to cook for me. There is no nothing. So I had to learn to cook. And sometimes I will call my mom and I'm like, okay, so I want to make this today. And then she'll be like, okay, well, this is what you do. And by the time I'm done, I was cooking, I was baking, I was doing everything. So
you see, they say necessity is the mother of invention. I had the pleasure of growing up in Tivoli, watching my great grandmother cook every Sunday, every day actually. You know, my great grandfather worked in River Antoine, and actually to this day, my grandfather ran the rum mill down there for 33 years and the whole sugarcane plantation there, Patrick Bowler. And so, you know, I sort of learned to cook almost by osmosis, like initially with my great grandmother and then just watching my mom on a Sunday. And I was surprised. It's amazing the amount of knowledge you pick up without realizing by just observation. And so when I went to uni, you know, like there was a lot of things I could do. But over and above that, because I was the eldest of 5 children growing up with a single mother, I'd started to learn from about 14 how to burn toast, how to make fish fingers that were crispy on the outside and still a frozen lollipop inside. so over time you learn stuff, right? And then when I got into banking, you know, suddenly I was exposed to a whole world of food, and I would eat something and I'd go home and say, I'm gonna recreate that. So that's how, you know, a lot of my love of food really developed, and my desire to learn to cook and cook extraordinary things.
Okay.
But hold on, before you ask the next question, let me just tell you, I also grew up cooking manikou.
Listen, let me tell you, I almost lost my hands to a manikou one time.
Yeah,
because you know in Grenada we go hunting, and you know, and one night
I used to do that.
Yeah, so one night me and the boys went hunting, and so I climbed the tree, and we're like, there's a manikou here. I'm like, okay, I'm sitting on the branch. It's night. I can't see anything. My hand on the branch like this, and I'm just like, yo, the manikou is gone. I'm gonna come down. And they're like, all right, cool, come down. So I put on my light just to shine to see where I got to pass to come down. And the manikou was right there, right there on my hand. Like, I kid you not, one maybe 5 seconds later, and I don't know what would have happened, but maybe because you know, if the manikou really grip you, then you're in trouble. Yeah, I mean, I shook it down one time. The dogs were on the ground, and well, you know what happened next. So
yeah.
So that was crazy. So I mean, you're in Canada now.
Yes.
You moved to England first, and then to Canada. You're in Toronto. I left Grenada when I was 18. No, I turned 19 in January, and I left Grenada in February. I went to Mexico. Went back to Grenada after studies. Then worked for 3 years, then moved to Canada. Been living in Toronto ever since. I actually went back some years, about 2 or 3 years ago, to work in the tourism industry. And as communication manager at the Tourism Authority. I came back here. I say this because you and I have had like an opportunity, a unique opportunity, if you want to call it that many people don't have. We got the opportunity to live and be out there and sort of explore the world. Not a lot of us have that opportunity. So what is one encouragement or one nugget of wisdom that you can live with a young boy, a young girl in the Caribbean looking at this, that, all they have is a dream of, doing something great? Like, what is one nugget of wisdom you can live with them?
Well, I think you hit on it. I think, look, as I told you, I walked barefoot as a child into Tivoli St. Andrews as a youngster. Today, I operate in boardrooms. It simply reflects a journey where I was always keen to learn and be engaged. So I think you have to keep yourself open to engaging people, stay interested in the world around you. You might be quite surprised because of that interest and desire, where it might lead you. But the thing that you actually said is the dream. Dream big, right? Dream big. Because I am not super smart or anything like that, but what I am is smart enough that I want to learn, smart enough that I'm always happy to engage people. Engaging strangers is just, for me, one of the most interesting things, because the amount of stories you can learn and what you can learn vicariously by someone's lived experience, not yours, is amazing. And that alone also puts you in a place where, because you're engaging with different people, you'd be surprised what shows up. So I would have to say, keep yourself open to engaging people, keep yourself open to constantly learning, share your perspectives with people, and just dream big, just continue with that. Because I think all of those things puts you in spaces where people look at you and say, oh, I remember Ray, I remember Kimron, I remember, whoever it might be. Yeah. And sometimes where the stuff is coming from, completely out of left field, that is so super helpful.
And that is a perfect way to end this discussion with you, Mr. William. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And to everyone looking on, again, thank you for tuning in to another week of Dropping Bars. We were talking to Mr. Ray William, one of the highest ranking Black banking executive in Canada. Again, like you said, from a young boy walking barefoot in Grenada, in Tivoli St. Andrew, to the boardrooms in Canada. So Mr. William, I salute you for all that you've done and all that you've been doing for the community and so on, and the way that you've been giving back. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and share with us and drop some awesome bars. I really appreciate it. And to everyone, thank you for tuning in to another week of Dropping Bars. I will see you next week. And don't forget to subscribe and follow wherever you're consuming this interview. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you next week.
Thanks a lot, Kimron.
Yo, a brightest tower representing Dropping Bars with Kimron Corion. It's all about life lesson in a youth. Bob Marley do it with them mouth, Zid and do it with them foot. Never doubt yourself. Never lose the focus. Just some more positive content, Fully provision. Good meditation. Dropping bars and I build the motivation. Yo, Kimron Corion. Every ghetto youth, them a pre-elevation. Stop carry feelings, focus on the arts and craft. Get rid of all malice and dirty art, youth. Work hard, believe in your dreams. These are the motivation tips, dog. Success strategies. Energy follow energies. Negative follow negativity. There is a free will to creativity. It's a journey within. Cause we dropping bars. Dropping bars. Dropping bars. We keep going hard. Going hard. Going hard. We keep dropping bars. Dropping bars. Dropping bars. Dropping bars. Dropping bars. We keep going hard, going hard, going hard. Dropping bars, dropping bars.